welcome to the September 13th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. If we can have roll call, Shannon, please.
Messina.
Here. Here.
Here.
Ingalls.
Here.
Lutrip.
Here.
Mandel.
Here.
McCracken.
Here.
Ward.
Here. Okay, if you can join me for the pledge, please.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We can have approval of minutes, please, for August 9th.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Second.
I have a first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. At this time, public comment. Anyone wishes to speak other than what's on our agenda tonight? Come on up. Just tell us who you are.
Is there a mic that I need to turn on, or
Nope, it's right there.
Yeah.
you can hear me just fine?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Can everybody hear us in the back? Okay.
Can you hear me?
You can? You can leave the room if you want.
Hi, thank you very much for your volunteering efforts for our community. My name is Merrill, formerly Mary Dowdy, a former employee of North Idaho College in the 1970s, long time ago. I currently live at 2276 West Windermere Avenue in Coeur d'Alene. I am a resident of Oakcrest Manufactured Home Park, which was purchased by Haven Park Capital Group in Orem, Utah last year. I'm here tonight to request that you preserve the current zoning as a manufactured home park. Although there are no current zoning requests, I ask you to make a commitment to maintain the zoning now and into the future. There are 454 families that are residents of our park. They include disabled veterans, senior citizens, parents, and local employees. Maintaining the zoning in our park is something that the city can do to help protect workforce housing and the residents of our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I left a letter here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, come on. Just tell us who you are.
Hello, I am Christine Matheny, and I am also a resident of Oakcrest Manufactured Home Park. I am sorry I'm not prepared, but I did want to have a voice tonight. Mary just let me know about it. My concern with Oakcrest Manufactured Home Park is they were purchased by a capital investment group last year, and they have significantly affected affordable housing for that community, raising rents for new residents to $7.95 a month. The capital group that did purchase the park is known for trying to shift zoning so that they can sell properties again to have high-density housing built. And I would like to request that you protect the zoning of manufactured home parks in the city of Coeur d'Alene so that developers do not have an opportunity to go in there and displace senior citizens, vets, disabled persons, low-income families, and our workforce that desperately needs affordable housing. Unfortunately, this park has already been impacted and it's pushing people out, but we need to find a way to preserve this in our city, and I ask you to keep that in your consideration.
All right.
Can you
Thank
clarify your cross streets, the boundaries? Can you just clarify for
Yeah.
all of us the boundaries of Oakcrest?
Oakcrest is located off of Ramsey between Kathleen and Dalton. It has got 454 current residents, and there's 480 spaces in there.
And it's
On the west side or east side?
It is on the west side of Ramsey,
All right.
Near the high school.
just south of Dalton. That's one of the entrance, Dalton and Ramsey.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone else. Staff
Mr. Chair?
Oh,
May I suggest that maybe you want to talk to Hillary? Hillary's worked with a group that is working on affordable housing. It's a rather broad-range group that have a lot of interest, and maybe that'd be somebody you could talk to.
And who would that be? Oh, great.
okay. Thanks, Peter. Staff comments.
Okay.
Well, good evening. So first announcement, you already saw the email, but I have a new last name. So my new last name is Patterson. So I want to make sure that's clear in the record because we're going to start seeing minutes with Director Ms. Patterson instead of Anderson. So that's new news. The Court Chair public hearing is scheduled for October 11th. We're starting that meeting at 3 p.m. And we're going to have the meeting adjourn at 9 p.m. if public testimony has not concluded. It will roll to the next day on the 12th. That will also start at 3 p.m. in this room. So I think all of you have that on your calendars, hopefully. So we're blocking out 3 to 9 p.m. both days. We don't know if we need the full amount of time. We will have a break in there from 5 to 5:30 to have some food and do all the good things you need to do on a little break and then resume the meeting. We're also going to work on kind of reorienting the room setup to make sure we can accommodate the community members.
Hillary, I got a question on it. What's the thought process behind that kind of starting at 3 and maybe going to the next day? I mean, all I saw was, the request for it. What's driving that a little bit?
Well, we had a recent public hearing that didn't have that many people and it went for hours, so we just expect that this one might go a little bit longer, just given the size of the request and
Okay.
the
Great.
neighborhood surrounding it. We think there's a lot of interest. They've had some meetings on their own, the development team has, and so we're just anticipating that. It's possible it will be concluded within the first day, and that's fine. We just wanted to plan in case it does go to the second day.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're welcome. And then an update on the short-term rental ordinance. I'm sure you've seen the articles about that, and of course, the Planning Commission will be very involved as we move forward with evaluating different options for looking at our code. We've done 2 presentations to the council members through the subcommittees, the General Services Public Works subcommittees, just to get some initial input. When we did the code last time around, I think it was really valuable to get council's input for the Planning Commission so that you kind of knew what they were looking at before you went too far down the road. So wanted to do that first. Now that we've concluded that and heard some feedback, we are going to be doing some stakeholder outreach to the neighborhood groups, to the short-term rental owners, and the Realtors Association, and seeking additional input. And then also contacting some of the short-term rental compliance companies to get information on their services and prices and options with that. And then we'll be scheduling the joint workshop with Planning Commission and City Council to have a really good open dialogue, and that will have public comment as well. And then from that, we'll work on code amendment and then have the public hearings going through that process. So a couple of opportunities for public input. So
Okay, thank you.
that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any commissioner comments?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
This weekend, it's rebirthed as the Kids Draw Architecture downtown is being put on by the Coeur d'Alene Arts Culture and the Tribe is sponsoring it. And there are still lots available for kids 10 and over. It's a really fun day for kids, and we get out and draw. And so if anyone is interested, it only costs $10, and they get a backpack, a T-shirt, and drawing supplies and a drawing book. So it's a win-win. So if anyone's interested, it's available online to register at artsandculturecda.org. And it's really fun. I'm missing it this year, but it's really a blast for the kids. So, thanks.
Thank you. John?
Just a comment and then a question. With respect to the speakers that came to talk to us about Oakcrest, and I guess I applaud you getting involved and getting out in front. As I'm hearing, there's no active action that you know of. Maybe your suspicions that maybe things are going to change or whatnot, but you're already getting involved, and I think that's great. That's how you be effective, I think, is to get involved and pull the community together, get to know the neighbors, build a list of folks. And we had a recent hearing in this room where the neighborhood was pretty networked, and it was pretty effective. So I'd say I applaud you getting involved and getting involved early. And then the question I have for staff is with respect to if and when there may be an action, say, zone change, whatever it might be. With respect to noticing, folks that live at Oakcrest own their building, but they lease their land. Would they typically be noticed in an action like that?
There are no active requests, you're right, so clarifying that. So they would get, so notification of if the whole property, if the entire mobile home park was up for that, yes, they would all be notified, as well as anyone within 300 feet of the boundaries of that development would be notified of any public hearing. And it's my understanding that, I'm not sure if these two individuals, but I believe so, have been in touch with our council member Kiki Miller, who's heading up the Regional Housing and Growth Issues Partnership, to kind of talk about, are there opportunities? There's a resident-owned community model that I'm not sure if that's an option at this point, given that there's a new owner, but yep, looking at some different opportunities to help them kind of preserve the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Okay. We're going to move on to our public hearing. We have one item. It's an applicant is Jack Riggs, and it's a request for a variance for fence height, and Mike's going to give us a little presentation on it. I'm assuming we don't have a sign-up sheet, because I only see the applicant here.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is the public hearing for item V-1-22. The applicant is Jack Riggs, and the request is for a variance in fence height to allow a 6-foot fence in the front yard setback area rather than a maximum of 4 feet as allowed. Property is located here, highlighted in red. This is Tubbs Hill. This is McEwen Park. This is 11th Street. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of the property. Here's 11th and Ash and Lakeshore Drive. Here is the applicant's site plan indicating the area of the requested variance. Everything highlighted in yellow is the area the applicant is requesting the variance for. Procedures for consideration of a variance. Variance application requests are held before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will need to find that 3 specific conditions exist before a variance is granted. The applicant has the burden to demonstrate to the Planning Commission that all 3 conditions are met. The conditions are A, B, and C, that there is an undue hardship because of the physical characteristics of the site, the variance is not in conflict with the public interest, and the granting of said variance will be in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
Mike, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. I forgot to ask if anyone has a conflict on this particular hearing. I just want to state, I did speak to the applicant. He called me at one time to say how we go about to do a variance, and I said, well, basically you got to talk to the staff, and you come before us and go from there. So I don't think it'll affect my judgment on this. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I live in the neighborhood. I don't believe my proximity to the property will affect my judgment. However, if the applicant would prefer me to excuse myself, I certainly would, before the hearing starts.
Okay. Is that all right, Randy, or is it kind of up to Peter to decide that?
Well, that would be up to Peter to decide, but that's not a legal conflict. You have no financial interest
That
in
is
the
correct.
issue.
Okay, all right. Sorry, Mike, go right ahead.
Thank you. Section 1709-615, procedures for consideration. An application for a variance from a provision of this title with respect to a modification of the requirements of this title as to lot size, lot coverage, width, depth, front yard, side yard, rear yard setbacks, parking provisions, heights for buildings, or other ordinance provisions affecting the size or shape of a structure or the placement of the structure upon lots or the size of lots shall be considered by the Planning Commission with an appeal allowable to the City Council. A variance shall not be considered a right or special privilege, but may be granted to an applicant only upon showing an undue hardship because of the characteristics of the site and that the variance is not in conflict with the public interest. The next 6 slides are site photos of the property. This is a view on 11th Street looking southward toward the subject property. This is the front area. The applicant originally built a 6-foot post and was notified that the fencing regulations and would be required to be 4 foot here. The applicant stopped construction, cut them down to 4 feet, and had a survey completed. And the survey stakes are located right here, and the posts were placed in front of the property in the right-of-way. Here's a photo from the applicant's driveway looking north on 11th Street. See, this is the property line. This is the sidewalk. Here's on the intersection of Ash and 11th Street, looking northwest through the property. Here's in front of the applicant's house, looking at the main entrance. And here's on the southeast corner of the property, looking west. The zoning, the property has split zoning. There's R8 zoning to the north along 11th Street and R3 also along 11th Street. However, fencing regulations are equal to all zoning districts, residential zoning districts. So the land use, so the surrounding land use is single-family, predominantly single-family dwellings with a duplex unit located here, Tubbs Hill civic use here, and commercial use owned by the marina. Variance request history. There have been a total of 6 variance requests over the last 15 years. The first 2 were in '07 for building height, and those were both withdrawn. In 2013, we had a front setback by the Coeur d'Alene High School, or the Coeur d'Alene School District, and that was approved. The building height request and a garage setback was denied in 2019, and a side yard setback for the city's water department essential service was approved in 2021. Sorry. The American Planning Association explains the primary reasons for lower fence heights in the front yards adjacent to streets as the heights permitted in front yards are usually lower because of the safety aspect, as well as in the interest of preserving an unobstructed view of open green lawns. There's little difference between restriction of vision by a wall or a high, thick hedge. Both are hazardous to cars coming into and out of driveways because they block the view of the driver. Fencing regulations 1706-815 states that fences, walls, and hedges shall be permitted in required yards in accordance with the following regulations. For residential uses in all zoning districts, the following shall apply. Fences, walls, and hedges not greater than 6 feet in height shall be permitted on or within all rear and side yard property lines, or on or within the front yard setback lines. And fences and walls and hedges not greater than 4 feet in height shall be permitted in any required front yard. So what is a front yard? So a front yard means a yard measured into a lot perpendicular from the front lot lines. A required front yard shall extend the full width of the lot between its side lot lines and shall remain open and unobstructed. So this is the applicant's property illustrating where the yards are. So along 11th Street, we have the front yard. Opposite of the front yard is the rear yard, and the remainder are the side yards. So 6-foot fences could be built in the sides along here, in the rear, and here, and 4 foot is allowed here in the front part. The city has a handout that they hand out for fencing regulations, and this is an illustration from the handout. It is attachment to your staff report, illustrating the front 20-foot setback and the allowed 4-foot fence maximum height here, and then beyond the 20 foot is the allowed 6-foot maximum height. So administrative determination of fence height setbacks at 801 South 11th Street. The community planning director and the city attorney have reviewed the property at 801 South 11th Street to determine if there is any legal avenue for allowing a 6-foot fence along 11th Street for the full length of the 2 parcels. And if there was an opportunity to interpret the northern portion of the property as a side yard due to the unusual shape of the 2 parcels. After review, all applicable sections of Title 17 of the Municipal Code, staff has determined that the full length of both parcels along 11th Street can only be viewed as the front of the lots. This means that the fence can only be 4 feet in height along 11th Street for both parcels unless it is set back 20 feet from the property line, in which case it could be 6 feet in height, as illustrated in the handout. The zoning code is very clear regarding definitions of alleys versus streets, corner lots, front yards versus side yards, front and side setbacks, and a maximum fence heights in relation to these setbacks. Staff has also reviewed the subject property and is of the opinion that there is no hardship due to the physical characteristics of the site related to the placement of the 6-foot fence. Staff acknowledges that there is some grade change on the property, but that fact does not justify a 6-foot fence within the front setback. The required findings for a variance. There's findings B8A through B8C, and we'll go through each and every one of those, starting with the first one, B8A, that there is an undue hardship because of the physical characteristics of the site. Idaho Code Section 67-6516 establishes the authority to grant variance subjects to the following. Each governing board shall provide, as part of the zoning ordinance, for the processing of applications for variance permits. It also goes on to state that a variance shall not be considered a right or special privilege, but may be granted to an applicant only upon showing an undue hardship because of the characteristics of the site and that the variance is not in conflict with the public interest. Here's the topographic map illustrating the topography on the applicant's property. The tighter the contour lines, the steeper the slope. The highlighted area in red is the portion of the property with a significant grade change. And you can see this is the grade illustrated from 11th and Ash. There is the physical characteristics of the property are similar to many of the other properties in the vicinity, and the property is significantly larger than most properties in the neighborhood. The property does not have any physical characteristics or topographical issues that would prohibit the applicant from building a 4-foot fence in the front yard of his property. Staff does not believe the topographical change on the rear of the property is a physical hardship warranting a variance. In staff's opinion, this condition has not been satisfied. The applicant will need to demonstrate to the Planning Commission how this condition is satisfied. The next finding is finding B8B. The variance is not in conflict with the public interest. First is public safety. For pedestrians traveling along the sidewalk and vehicles traveling on 11th Street, the danger of having a car backing out of a driveway into pedestrians and oncoming traffic is in conflict with the public's interest. Second is aesthetics and compatibility with other residential properties in the area, the residential neighborhoods throughout the city. The proposed variance to allow a 6-foot fence in the front yard setback area is in conflict with the public interest because of all other fencing along 11th Street conforms to the zoning ordinance and is aesthetically uniform. And third and final is the integrity of the zoning ordinance, in that this proposed variance would undermine that ordinance. This presents a major conflict with the public interest. Requiring all similar situated properties to be subject to the same rules is in the best interest of the public. To allow one homeowner to have a fence in excess of the height limitation, but require everyone else who lives in the city to follow the laws and regulations is not in the public's interest. The proposed variance would undermine the zoning ordinance and staff's ability to enforce the code. The proposed variance is in conflict with the public interest. In staff's opinion, this condition has not been satisfied. The applicant will need to demonstrate to the Planning Commission how this condition is satisfied. The last finding is finding B8C, that the granting of the said variance will be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan indicates that this area, the subject property, is designated as single-family neighborhood, and single-family neighborhood places are the lower density housing areas across Coeur Lane where most of the city's residents live, primarily in single-family homes on larger lots. Supporting uses typically include neighborhood parks and recreation facilities. Compatible zoning is R1, R3, R5, and R8, and MH8, and this property is R3 and R8. Each of the zoning districts allows property rights. So all private property within the city limits has land use zoning assigned to it. That zoning associated with that parcel has uses by right, which are allowed to be constructed according to the city's development ordinances. The comprehensive plan also goes on to list a list of goals and objectives. I won't read them all. They're on page 25 and 26 of your staff report. A couple of them are a goal would be maintain high quality of life for residents and businesses that make Coeur d'Alene a great place to live and visit. The objective would be to maintain the community's friendly, welcoming atmosphere and a small town feel. as far as the growth and development, develop a mix of land uses throughout the city, balance housing and employment while preserving the qualities that make Coeur d'Alene a great place to live. And the objective would be to recognize neighborhoods and district identities. The proposed variance is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. There is no support within the comprehensive plan to allow the special treatment for one property owner in a single-family residential area when other property owners are held to the same city code standards. In staff's opinion, this condition has not been satisfied. The applicant will need to demonstrate to the Planning Commission how this condition is satisfied. After thoroughly analyzing the proposed variance requests, city code and state statutes relating to variances, staff has determined that the application does not satisfy all three of the required conditions that are needed in order to approve a variance. The slight topographical change on the subject property is not an undue hardship warranting a variance. The proposed variance is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The proposed variance is in conflict with the public interest and will undermine the city's ability to enforce the fencing code regulations in the future. Staff recommendation is to deny the requested variance. Action items, alternatives would be the Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to deny or deny without prejudice. And the findings worksheet is attached. A couple things to also consider, it's not the type of the fence because we're just going from 4 feet to 6, so we're not looking at the design of the fence or anything like that, just the height. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions, Mike? Nope, okay. Thanks. Thanks, Mike. Okay, come on up, Jack.
Come on.
Name, city you live in, and I'll swear you in.
Jack Riggs, 801 South 11th Street.
Do you solemnly swear and/or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, and congratulations, Hillary. As I listen to that presentation, I'll say that obviously I'm asking you to make a decision that would be contrary to the staff report, but that's exactly what I am going to ask you to do. I do thank you for having this hearing, and I'm sorry this is the only one on the agenda, so to bring you in on a Tuesday. But thank you for having a variance process available. And obviously, we all heard that it's not very common that variances are even applied, are requested. You already know my name and address. I think as a little bit more of introduction, I'm a lifelong resident of Coeur d'Alene. I've lived at this address for over 36 years. And I think many of you we've met before and know that my wife and I have always been supportive of Coeur d'Alene. We have respect for law, rules, regulations. We know, and you would know this from my past work in government, that rules and regulations require definitions. I would also suggest that as good and accurate as written definitions try to be, there are always some circumstances that don't really fit. In Coeur d'Alene, the residential planning definitions probably do fit 99% of the properties because much of Coeur d'Alene is pretty flat with grid-like streets and almost all houses face the street. But what do you do when the established definitions don't really describe an existing property, as I believe that this is the case? Today, my wife and I are seeking a simple variance from the definitions because of the uniqueness and actually the oddness of our property. We know the staff report does not support this request. We know applications for variances are not common, but they're not easy, but they are available to all citizens. The staff report seems to imply that by approving this request, that a floodgate would open and our entire community would be at risk. This simply isn't so. The request would do no harm to the public interest or invalidate the comprehensive plan. There is no slippery slope here. First and foremost, please recognize that 6-foot solid fences are allowed all over town right next to sidewalks and streets with no property line setbacks for side yards on corner lots. So this request is really about the definition of a front yard as opposed to a side yard. Our request is simply to allow a 6-foot, non-side obstructing wrought iron fence on our side yard in the same way that they are already allowed on corner lots all over town. As planning commissioners, you have the authority and responsibility to look at unusual circumstances and make decisions for unique situations. We would just like what has always been our side yard to be treated as a side yard rather than a front yard, which it is not. I'd like to now show some photos to help facilitate this request. This will be one of the main aspects of what that I want to share about corner lots. Because with corner lots, 6-foot fences are allowed on the sides and the back behind the 20-foot front setback. And many of these, and I'll have a number of photos, these fences are right along the sidewalk, so the issue about backing out and that just would not be an issue. And I'll just go through these fairly quickly. 6-foot fence right along the sidewalk, right along the curb, sidewalk. These are all corner lots. Because I believe the part of the goal of the fencing ordinance, which I would understand when you have front yards, you want the lower fence, and then for privacy, a higher fence is allowed on the side and the back. That makes sense. So there's, and these fences are all over. These are all in my neighborhood, basically. And it's just a fraction of them. So the question is, front versus side. I think the current definitions, as I said, you have to have definitions, but the current definitions are a little bit rigid. Merriam Dictionary just says the front yard is just the yard in front of the house. And as I said, the current definitions probably do fit 99% of the residential Coeur d'Alene properties. But when is the front of the house not the front and the side not the side? You saw a photo like this. This is the front of the house. It sits at an angle, so we are down the hill, and this is the slope as it slopes down to the 11th Street Marina. So as I view, and as we have viewed since I've been in the house, there's a front yard, which I'll show you, but by definition, the side of the house is to your right, and that would make the area by the basketball court the side yard. And you all know that's not according to the definition as it exists, but common sense says that's the front of the house, there's a front yard and a side yard. This is a better view of the side yard. We're seeing just the edge of the garage door, which faces the front of the house, which makes the wall with the green plants growing to the right of that. That's the side of the house. This is the front yard, as viewed from our front porch to the middle, to the left, and to the right. So I'm not saying we don't have a front yard, but I'm saying this is our front yard. This is a view from standing a few feet off the porch, perpendicular, parallel. I came out perpendicular from the front of the house, took the photo parallel to the front of the house towards Stubbs Hill, just to give you a better perception. This is from the street, once again showing we have two garages and a wide driveway, which has been there for decades. The front door, the right marked in red, that is facing the front of the house. The other in black print is obviously facing the side or the end of the house. This is a view from the city sidewalk to the north, across the area in question, viewing the side of the house. And once again, not to belabor it, but in my mind and every person I've talked to, that would make this the side yard. This is a view from the basketball court, which is within what is considered being defined as the front yard setback. And this is a view back to the house, and there's a close-up on the right upper photo. And my question would be, how is it able, in my front yard setback, to see the back of my house? I mean, you can't see the back of your house from your front yard. The two lower photos are from the back of the house looking out to the side yard. This is a mark of the 20-foot setback that's being proposed by the staff report from the street. And you can see that if you were to put a fence there, it would fit, it would be allowed, but it wouldn't make any sense because you've then eliminated 20 feet and there is no house back behind this line. So a few photos about our terrain. It is the area, the one area that we've been looking at, obviously, is flat. But out of the front of the house, this is actually the back. This is down on East Lake Shore as it wraps around by Tubbs. Right in the center, you can't really tell, but that's the back of our house. So that's what we're dealing with. This is on the side, look from East Lake Shore, looking up, and again, you can't really see the house. But that's the terrain that was referred to. This is a photo from the front. That there's a front corner that dips down, and you can, again, the house below us, further south on 11th Street, it's down a grade, and I'll show you, you can barely see it. The posts that are there were not cut off. Those posts you see are actually 6-foot posts because we stopped with that change. This is from the city sidewalk. This is the type of outcropping that is down on that southeast corner. And then the reference to neighborhoods. We have many wrought iron fences in the Sanders neighborhood. There's a number that are over 4 feet and 5 feet, and some posts are over 6 feet. This one is 4'8". The posts are 4'10". This one is 5'3", and the posts are 5'7". And this one, the main part of the fence is 5'10", almost 6 feet, and the posts are actually 6'5". There are non-conforming, and I don't want to dwell on that or talk about neighbors, but there's plenty of other fences that don't meet these requirements. The last comment is, and the last set of photos, this is the issue. This isn't a fence about keeping people out. This is not a solid fence. It's meant to be a wrought iron decorative fence. It's not a fence company that was even doing it. It's a metal manufacturing company. And my wife isn't going to speak because if she gets started on the deer topic, it might not be pleasant. I've lived in the house over 36 years. This has been a problem that's was not a problem. It's been the last 10 years and really the last few years. And nothing that my wife does helps. She sprays stuff. We've tried the water things. So the impetus to have a fence is to protect the property from deer. So that's a goal. It's not to create a fortress or some of the things that were referenced. Yesterday morning, in a 5-minute drive in the neighborhood, all these deer, and actually there were some others that I didn't get photos of. This was all yesterday morning in a 5-minute drive. The photo in the right lower corner, this is not an area that we're asking to put behind the fence, but this is the slope down in front as the steep hill goes down to the marina. Everything's been eaten by the deer. So some of that is what's been happening, up on the property. So, I mean, that's just out of context. I mean, really the impetus for this fence is related to deer. And I'm going to go very quickly because this is a deer trail at that lower corner. It comes down onto the city sidewalk. And then there's just a couple quick pictures of 2 dead deer, one last year and one about 4 weeks ago in our yard. There was no mention of public, the neighbors' solicitation for comments. Shanna sent those forward, and to my count, there were 8 neighbors, and 6 of which are right adjacent to our property, 2 that are a block away. 1 that were in favor, so 8 in favor. There was 1 person around the corner that said, that they weren't for, kind of non-specific reasons, but for some of the same reasons that the staff report alluded to. So I'll summarize our basic request, that you recognize this property simply does not fit the standard definitions well, and that to please consider this as you would a corner lot, which the many photos allows a 6-foot fence on the side and backyard. I mean, specifically a side yard on a corner. In essence, our house, because it sits at this angle, functionally it is like a corner, but it doesn't meet the definition of a corner lot. So I would argue in many ways this property is unique and odd. There are hardships on certainly parts of it, and there's one side yard, and that's the area that's in question. And I would just simply say that it's a side yard, it's not a front yard, even though the definition of a front yard setback, as applied, creates the issues that are being proposed. And I would just say, please consider it as a side yard. Thank you for your time, and I'd answer any questions if you have any.
Questions?
Dr. Riggs, one of the questions, or one of the pictures I saw, I don't know if it was yours or Mike's, up by the basketball courts, it looked to me like there's like a masonry wall.
Yes, there is.
Is that part of the property?
Yes, it is.
What's the height of that?
It's about 4 feet.
So
Maybe an inch or two more, but
is that, is that part of the proposal to retrofit that to 6 foot as well?
no, the fence would just come up and abut to it.
Would the deer jump over that?
Well, there's arborvitae.
So
Well, when
there's
they
a-
eat enough of the arborvitae, then they just jump through. I don't, I'm going to say, I don't think any fence, is perfect, but when we started the project, and again, it wasn't a fence company, it was a metal fabrication company, and they just said they knew that they could do 6-foot fence, and we're all standing there and said, well, clearly that's side yard. And I know there was a question about why we cut the post. We cut the post, this was several months ago. I cut the post because I was going to just say, okay, we'll just do that. Once they were cut, it just like it doesn't make sense. And at the same time, Avista said, we have a gas line under there, so we'd like you to move the post. They did the survey, and so part of this would be, going forward, would be to move the posts back behind those flags, another 18 inches.
The real question I think that I hear is the definition of side yard versus front yard.
Yes.
So in your view, I guess I would turn to the city attorney and a plain right to give some type of guidance as to what the definition is, and we may have a disagreement on that definition. I think we do.
Yes, Commissioner, I believe that is the disagreement, and what I am suggesting is that the definition fits 99% of properties in town, but it doesn't fit this property well because the front of the house is turned similar to a corner lot. It's not turned 90 degrees, but it's turned enough that this flat area that we've been looking at it's on the side of the house, but yet under the strict interpretation of the definition, the front yard setback has to be met, even though it's clearly on the side 120 feet from the house, up the block. And so that is the fundamental argument, that clearly there is a front yard to the house, and there's the side, but technically, right now, it's the definition, as the definition is written, which it applies to 99% of the time, for this property, it just doesn't make sense.
Other questions? John, you got enough?
Well, just straight on, the staff report takes a position that there's no hardship. What's your take on, what's the basis of the hardship?
If I had to say the hardship, the uniqueness of the property, the house was built in 1950, so I believe a new owner that was planning a house would look at the current definitions and they would have to take that into effect. And Hillary did say it doesn't matter where the house is located, that's that's not a hardship. This property developed again 70 years ago, before these definitions were in place. Clearly, and again, I'm going to say go back in time. I mean, there was a front yard and there's two sides and there's a back. I mean, most houses have those components. And so, we are now left with, what is the definition of a front yard? I mean, and having a front yard setback. The house is well over 20 feet from the street, so that's not it. And I looked today when I pulled out, the driveway. I mean, we've been pulling out of the driveway. I mean, as people do. I mean, you have to back out of the driveway, but the fence would not be an obstruction, so.
Other questions? Staff, or
Well, I have a question of staff after.
I've got a question on, within the city, how's a front yard determined? Is it front door, address, Mike, or Hillary, or Randy?
That's in your staff report on
Page 11.
It is determined by the lot line, not the orientation of the house. So the front lot line is the one along the street. The side lot line is on the side of the lot, not within the front or rear yards.
And that's determined by the street itself, not the position of the house, whether the house is on an angle, or the front door is on an angle, or the front door is facing the rear yard, or anything
Determined
like
by
that.
the lot line, not by the orientation of the house.
Okay. More questions?
Just one, on the, you'll notice I'm directionally challenged. On the end of your lot closest to the water, going down on the grade, is that a hedge and a retaining wall next to the steps? Did I see that?
Oh, there is a hedge, as it slopes down.
Yeah, a hedge, and that surely is higher than 6 feet. It looked to be 6 feet. Is that correct?
I'm sure it's 4 feet. No, that hedge was there. I'm going to say that's a original hedge.
Okay.
It's grown, it can be trimmed.
And there are, I did recognize, I think, some properties, that.
Yeah, it's photo
Yeah.
6. You know.
I'll say that lower corner, if you're on the sidewalk, it's about 12 feet up the rock to
Okay.
get to where the front lawn slopes down to that point, which is about 10 to 12 feet above the sidewalk.
And then I think, I also don't know if it was in yours or staff report, but I did recognize some properties with high blocking fences that face 11th. Is that correct?
Correct.
So,
And many of the ones I showed were on 11th Street. And if I may, the point of that is, if you have a corner lot, it's perfectly acceptable to put a 6-foot completely side obstructing fence, essentially right on the property line, but most people put it right on the sidewalk.
but those are traditional property lots, square.
The traditional square, yes. So if you meet the definition of a corner, which ours does not, because we have one house below us, even though the house that's below us, we can barely see the roof. We're not on a corner, but functionally, it's like we're on a corner. And that's part of my request so it's not about, there's no 6-foot fences. There are lots of 6-foot fences right on sidewalks, right on streets, because they're side yards of corner lots. And I'm asking to be considered for that flat part to be a side yard, because it's the side of the house.
I have a question along the same lines. On photos 1 and 2, there's a brick wall with hedges. And then these posts that have been already installed are cut to 4 feet, right?
Correct.
So that brick wall is 4 feet.
Yes.
Matches the post height, but that's your neighbor's property,
No,
correct?
that's, the brick wall is around the basketball.
Is around the basketball
That's,
court,
yeah,
okay.
that's our basketball court. And if I may add one thing if we were to do the 20-foot setback into the lawn from 11th Street on this, what I call the side yard, the basketball court, it would bifurcate, it would go, I would have to cross the basketball court with a fence, which also wouldn't make
Which would
sense.
be behind that retaining wall and the trees that are there presently, if we're looking at photo 2? Is that, if I'm,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have.
Do you want me to go back to this one?
Yeah, I'm just, yeah, saying that if you did a setback to do 6 foot, 20 foot back, it would be behind that retaining wall.
It would be
Wouldn't-
behind it, but the retaining wall, that's 50, the basketball court's 50 feet wide plus the grass strip. If you go 20 feet back from the property line, that's about where this red line would be. And it would cut across the basketball court.
And it would be behind that retaining wall that's on 11th Street right now.
It would be, yeah, because the retaining wall is U-shaped. The front
Right.
part is against 11th Street. The long part is against the alley.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a wing over here. So it's basically like a wide U shape.
Right. Yeah, just wanted clarification on Sarah's
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it on the aerial, I think, a little bit too.
But another question, I think, for staff is, so on the uphill side, on 11th of the property, there's that retaining wall, and then there's 8-foot landscaping, right, in front of it. So it's not a fence, but it's not a hedge, but it's like tall, I don't even know what kind of bushes or trees there are, but they're they're probably 8 feet or 10 feet, right?
And you're looking at photo 2?
I'm looking at photo 1, well, photo 1 and 2. So adjacent to the property on the uphill side on 11th, there's a
No,
retaining
yeah.
wall, light blocking, and large
That's page 5.
landscaping. Yeah, page 5.
Arbor vitae.
So around the basketball court, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah,
The arborvitae, yeah.
it's the arbor vitae.
So, yeah, the code does say that you're not supposed to be taller than 4 feet. We don't strictly enforce vegetation. It's different than fencing, because we don't,
because it's
a little
not
bit different.
permanent.
It grows, it's not
Okay.
permanent, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in technicality, that should be 4 feet within that front setback
I'm
area
not
as
saying,
well.
I'm not advocating for that.
Cut it
It's just
down.
clarifying what the guidelines are with vegetation in front of structures.
Peter?
Mr. You had commented about along the neighborhood there, you took some pictures and measured the height of some fences, that they were in excess, on front yard, I think they were front yards, were in excess of 4 feet.
Yes.
Would be agreeable to limit your fence to the height of the highest fence along your neighbors? 5'7" or whatever it is?
Yes.
You would, okay.
But-
Because that raises my question of staff, is if there are fences on the front lots that are higher than permitted, what is the city's responsibility? I'm not, we had I'm hesitant to ask this question, but I just have to, I couldn't sleep at night. A year or so ago, we had an issue here, I think it was 10 inches. And we ruled that 10 inches was too much. And so they had to redo the roof of the house. So I live in that neighborhood, and I understand the side and the front. But then if there's some fences that are higher than allowed, I'm not proposing that the city go down there and afterwards, after they're in there and so forth, and cut them down or have the owner cut them down. But I would think it would be fair to permit this property owner to have the same height of the average, which I all think are all under 6 foot, of the neighbor, along East Lake Shore Drive, which would be less than 6 feet, but more than 4.
Well, staff can't look at the code like that, so we have to look at it for how it's written.
That's right, and
We have complaints right now that we're working on, people that have overheight fences within the front yard, and we're having them cut those down.
Well,
And in the side yard as well, if they've
after
exceeded
that, I'll
6
have
feet.
some
So it's
follow-up
kind of
questions.
complaint-based code enforcement, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I have a question again for staff, Hillary, Mike. They put a 4-foot fence right along the property line in
They
lieu of a 6-foot?
can, in their case, it sounds like there's an easement, so they'd have to be outside of that easement. But yes, they can do a 4-foot on the property line, or in their case,
Right,
behind the
where
easement.
kind of maybe back a little bit further, but
Right.
4-foot fence, and then kind of sloping a little bit more when it gets to the driveway, or 4 foot all the way to the driveway?
Right, you can tie into where that, the 20-foot setback. And then Randy pointed out, we were looking at the code too, there is a provision for a special use permit for like sports courts to be able to do a 6-foot height. So there is an option to do a 6-foot height around the basketball court through special use permit in a residential zone.
Go ahead, Lynn.
I'm swaying.
Yeah.
I didn't want to tear off a roof for 10 inches, just want to get that on record. I see this as a sport court, and I see the R8 as being something that could be fully fenced with 6 feet, and that includes going back to your garage. What I don't like, and I don't even like the looks of it, is having a fence in front of those beautiful stairs going up to your house, and you've got all those nice hedges. I'm thinking, I'd rather isolate this fence, and yeah, bring it around the backside, because you got to keep as many of those deer out as you can. But they used to come right up on my steps, 6 steps up and eat my hosta. So I'm not opposed to thinking of this as a sport court, because it's obviously doing that for your neighborhood. But the R8 section of this lot is where it should end, to my mind, and tie into the garage and have a gate and all that. But I really don't like the look of it down in front of the house. I think it's too forceful. It's a little too, arm up and, keep them out. I know the deer are just a pain in the butt.
If I may, we have discussed actually moving, because we would be more than 20 feet back, not having that fence there where you're talking about, and putting it up higher,
Yeah.
actually across our front yard, kind of from our porch to the
Then you don't
edge.
see it, and it's not in your
Correct.
face as you
Yes.
walk down the street, because it really is quite a barricade to run all that length of a double lot against a very, armed and ready kind of thing.
We would actually agree with you, and when I made the application, I kind of split it into the side yard issue and then that part. But, because we do consider what you're talking about to be our front yard, so, we're certainly open to doing a different approach
I mean,
there.
you're quite right. This truncated triangular lot is a challenge. And in better times, maybe even the street address might have been on the lower south side, but it isn't. It's on the east side. So, but I would recommend that maybe we allow the R8 around the basketball court, just on the north side of your, north side of your driveway, that is the fence that I see there now. But that lower one that's right at your stair line, I don't even know how you're going to get in there to maintain those bushes underneath the plantings. So I'd be willing to offer that up if anyone else was. I think we're walking that fine line with an awkward site.
Sure.
And I've seen that kind of condition before, and I think that would be a better solution.
And perhaps clarity on site photo 4.
Yeah, there. But that could go to
And
6
maybe
feet.
staff can look at that, and
We've already got the arborvitae at probably 8 feet.
where the sport court, where the retaining wall is in the back. So from what portion of that fence along 11th Street
That's the
there?
R8. I mean, that's the R8 site. That's really the R8
Right,
portion
and
of
then
this.
R8 has all the
And then the driveway.
vegetation around
Right.
it.
Well, it's got it up to here.
Yeah.
It's short. It's not very long.
Right.
And then the rest of it would be there in return along the driveway.
I'm just trying to get clarity, so depending on how this goes, everyone can see what you're proposing.
Do we have a plan anywhere that has the house plan on the site? Is there anything with the actual house siting? I know it's twisted by, 25 degrees or some cockeyed thing.
Yeah, it's not I'm going to say it's not a great, this is it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, may I step over and?
You can step over there, probably
Step
won't be
over.
able to hear what you're saying,
What,
but
no,
yeah.
why don't we have them use the mouse?
I can see, yeah.
Oh.
Use the mouse?
Yeah, the
Okay,
mouse
sure.
you can point with the cursor.
So I believe
Yeah, it's
Commissioner
not
Fleming
oriented correct.
is referring to this area,
Yeah.
and then having here actually move, we have talked about having the fence up, so basically wouldn't even see it from the street. It would be far
And that
back.
would be preferable to what I'm seeing right now with those current
That-
fence lines.
I believe that would be acceptable to
You're
us.
coming, on that plan, you're coming from that date line
Yes.
down, you're turning where you pick up the block fence, you turn along 11th, and then you go back into your garage. And that way you've got a security, and all the backside on the Tubbs Hill side is tall fence. I mean, that's not an issue. But I just see moving that whole fence line up so that you really do set that house
Right
as
here.
its frontage. And yes, there is a very deep side lot. I don't see that as a big issue, but then it's better than a huge hedge. I just came from Vancouver from home, and I'm like, huge hedges everywhere, 20, 30 feet. It's like, no, don't do that.
Okay, for clarity, depending on who makes the motion and how that motion might be regarding to this, is everyone understand what Lynn
Does that
kinda-
make sense?
Yeah, to,
Is anyone in
Huh?
total opposition?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand, but I'd like to make a comment if I could. And I really appreciate the detail in the staff recommendation. It really clearly spelled out what's going on here. And the bottom line is, it's a side yard, legally by definition. But I'm not sure the definition is exactly what it should be, as you'd indicated. You know, you have a lot that is a very strange configuration that makes this almost all side yard property instead of having a front and a back and so on. The terrain itself, you go from elevated down to lower levels. It's really an awkward site overall. The building orientation, and it's like, this is the front door, go pick up your mail and come in. It's all oriented differently. And the site is controlled by the plat, so we can't very well change the lot lines at this point in time. So we have a situation where, in my opinion, there is no precedent that is to be set by approving what this man is requesting due to the unique character of the site itself. I don't see it as conflicting with the comp plan, and I really don't see it conflicting with the public interest. I mean, it's any other property, you would see there's a side yard, some put up a fence, you wouldn't question it. Legally, I understand there is an issue here, but I think the issues of configuration, terrain, orientation, and so on warrant and justify a variance in this case.
Thank you for that. Peter?
Well, so is the hardship the orientation of the house? What is the hardship? We have to see an undue hardship. What is
I would
undue
say the
hardship?
I
sighting
think
of
it goes
the
beyond
house.
just
One
the
at a
house.
time here. Go ahead.
Yeah. It goes
Peter,
beyond the house, the actual lot configuration itself. I mean, if there was a tree in the middle of a lot and someone had to move their house too close to the property line, we would say that's a legal zoning hardship. I don't see what's going on here. Yeah, that's correct. That one I'm sure of. The rest gets marginal, but that one, Peter, I think I'm correct on. But, I mean, between the lot configuration, the lot elevation, the building configuration, the fact that this is almost completely side yard, I think there is a hardship there.
Well, the definition, as I understand of the front yard, is it's whatever the shape is, it follows the street. That's the definition, right? So we want to sit here and change the definition, say that halfway through something, that becomes a side yard. How can we do that? What is our authority to define that the side yard starts at some place and where the front yard stops? When the definition there, and I might add that I was surprised to see a variance because we don't have many. 6 and 15 years, not very many, you know. And secondly, I've not seen a staff report that has the city attorney and the planning director both render the report to us. I mean, so there's some senior staff time that's been paid to this, attention to pay this. I certainly understand, empathize with the issue. As a sidelight, the deer in my area, they took all my tomatoes last night, and so they're upset, and I am upset. But that's part of the thing. I have a hard time defining the front yard versus side yard different than what the city attorney has said. So I am going to support the city's position and not approve the variance if it comes up that way, or that's how I'm going to vote. You know, I do not make motions for various reasons.
Go ahead.
I would just say, I think it's interesting if we took the property outside of the grid area of Sanders Beach, because I grew up in Southwest Portland, all sorts of hills, crazy shaped properties, terrain. The orientation wouldn't be 100% applicable to every lot. And so that's, I think when I'm thinking about this, just a consideration of the downtown typically has lots that are more traditional where the orientation is typical, and and this happens to be a very unique one in that environment. If we had to go up closer to Tubbs or where the lots are not as traditional in shape and orientation, would we have a different mindset? So I think it's the location of the unique location orientation of the lot, as Phil was saying, that in other places would we, I'm not suggesting redefining or ignoring the definition, but thinking about a variance of the hardship is really maybe not a hardship, but just the uniqueness and the orientation of the house relative to the lot, relative to the street is such that it'd be very hard. I could see it being argued both ways. I understand the staff report. I don't disagree with it. I understand the argument that based on the lot and the orientation, it could be viewed as a side yard just based on the uniqueness, and that in another neighborhood, we might see that as being more in keeping with the neighborhood, because most lots in Sanders Beach, I assume, are more traditional in their size and orientation.
I've got
Go
some
ahead,
thoughts
John.
too,
Yeah.
but we're starting to debate here when I wonder whether we should continue with
Close the testimony.
close the testimony before we are talking about our positions and such,
Yeah.
but,
Okay. That being said, Jack, you have anything else to add before we do close public testimony on this? Unless, Sandy, you want to say something before I close public testimony?
To Commissioner Lutrop, I don't believe that I'm asking to change in the code the definition. But what I was trying to do is point out that while the definition probably applies to 99% and makes sense for 99% of properties, there are properties, and at least this is one, I don't know of another one, but for this property, when you look at the house of what is a front yard and a side yard, the definition does not fit well. And that's just a statement of fact. And so I did not know about a special use permit for the sport court. If the approach was to allow the 6-foot fence on the north lawn because there is a sport court, that would certainly be acceptable. And based upon Commissioner Fleming's comments, we'd certainly be agreeable to not do the fence right along the driveway on the south side and move it up where actually nobody would even see it. Those things all, I think, would be a reasonable solution in this case.
Before I close public testimony, how would we address that, let's say, in lieu of the conversation we just had with, is it a condition or changing the fence, or how do we make a recommendation on what we do?
But with the variance, you can't condition it. So
Okay.
that is not an option. So I think there are two different things you're looking at. So if a special use permit is required for a sport court, that can't be part of the variance request unless
So,
Randy has a
Randy,
different.
do we either approve or disapprove this particular item in front of us as is, and can't really change anything, even though some of us might or might not want to change anything, even though the applicant might be in agreement with some changes? Is that a possibility to do, or bring this back to the table at some other point in time, or continue this, or what do we do on this situation, given what the discussion has been so far?
Again, you have to follow the findings, and you make certain findings with respect to the request. You're not bound by anything. in terms of how you make those findings. So you would have to make, for example, you'd have to make a finding that part of this line is a side yard line and part of it is a front yard line. But you would have to justify that by reasoning of some kind in order to support your finding. If you find that there's an unusual hardship, you have to support that with facts. But you can't condition it, but I think you can grant a variance in part and deny it in part if you make certain findings.
Okay.
In terms of what is a front lot line and side lot line and unusual hardship. So it's really up to the commission. I will attempt to guide you as you go through those findings.
Okay.
But you're not bound by the request as written, especially if the applicant wants to change his request.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to close public. Oh, go right ahead, real
I
quick.
will point out on the official variance request, under justification, paragraph A, I did split it into an A and B, and A references the area north of the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
And the B request was south of the driveway. So if that helps, if you could approve the A portion and not the B, that would.
Okay. All right. No other comment right now. I'm going to close public testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to bring it to commission for further discussion and any type of a motion, if there be one, based on.
I don't have a motion, but, I'd take us back, Commissioner Fleming, you mentioned a 10-inch variance that crossed our desk a couple of years ago. And that was a real struggle. I wanted to approve that so bad that this was a situation where the folks built, this is a nice house south of Sherman. They built the house and the garage or whatever was 10 inches too high, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And a whole bunch of neighbors, just like we have here, said, "Oh, no problem. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I'm fine. What's 10 inches? What's 10 inches? No big deal. No big deal. No big deal." And we kept hammering the point of what's the hardship? What's the hardship? And basically, they said, "Well, there really isn't one. It's just, well, we'd have to tear it out, And, is the expense a hardship in that case? That was one that pained me a lot because I wanted to approve it. But for integrity of process and whatnot, I'm not sure we had the opportunity to. And so, I walked away from that one with a real bad taste in my mouth. Really wanted to approve that. My takeaway, as I understood from staff and legal staff, is this, Idaho code has a real high bar for what hardship is. But that said, that's the one side. The other side, Commissioner Ward spoke very well about, this is, I've heard the word unique site, atypical, awkward. It isn't just, the little houses going up 7th Street where they look like the diagram, This doesn't look anything like the diagram, This is one like the 10-inch roof deal. I want to say yes. I think it's going to be done well. The neighbors support it. It's going to look fine, I believe, and done well. I can't imagine, this is a kind of a grand scale house on a grand scale lot that does have rock outcroppings and angles and peculiarities. We've seen any number of fences that really don't offend me that I saw here that this would, I'm guessing, look much better than. So I kind of want to say yes. I just don't know if the justification for this fitting a hardship is there. I struggle with that a little bit.
Well, I have to say that we keep talking semantics, the semantics of how the house is placed, and that the side yard on the north side is on the side of their home. To me, that's a side yard. And I think this much real estate should have the right to fence it because they've got this sport court. They'll allow people in or they won't allow people into that sport court or deer. But I do think that in this unusual shaped lot, that does constitute their side yard. And you can almost look at it as being a two-piece element, that you've got this grand home that's facing twisted on the lot, and yes, move that fence back, don't put that. And the neighbors aren't gonna say, oh, well, that's not a side yard, that's the front. I mean, come on, that's petty. So I think we just say, this is a side yard to this house in an unusual twisted siting, which was done for views, I'm sure, and light. And that we say that yes, to part A on the north side, that would make sense. That B should move back and away up onto the hill, 20-foot setback. We're well within the range of requirements. So I don't think we're fighting an uphill battle here. I think we're just saying this is a very large lot. It also has a development, skewed. There's two development parcels here. There's an R3 and an R8. So that would be the natural shake. And as I say, this is one of our elite properties, and it deserves something special, not a free-for-all of deer. So.
It'd be interesting to see who makes a motion and what that motion might be, but go ahead.
I guess I have
Go
a
on.
staff question
Sarah,
real
go ahead.
quick. I'm trying to be creative, I guess. I have a staff question on on an R3 zoning, the side setbacks to the next house, to the property line, to the next.
If there's an alley, then it's, 5 and 5. If there's not an alley, it's 5 and 10.
And on R8?
It's the same. Is that correct, Mike? Yep, okay,
And R8's the same?
correct.
So it looks like on the land use map, I don't know if this is the best one to look at, but it looks like there's a parcel line
What page you
on
on,
page
Sarah?
8, which goes right along by the garage. So I would say if we would consider that R3 zoned lot to that line that's right by the garage, if they met all of the requirements for fencing within that parcel, then the adjoining R8 parcel, as long as that fence from the garage to the front is 20 feet back, right, for the front yard, then that R8 parcel would be considered a sport court, but it would still meet, the R3 parcel would still meet all fencing requirements by moving the one on the south up and keeping a 20-foot setback on the front yard if you're looking at the house on the left, and then if you're looking at the house 5 feet to the right of the garage and 20 feet back, and then looping around the sport court with a 6-foot fence as a side yard, I guess. Would that make
That's what you said. That's what I said. You
sense?
repeated what I said.
But I mean, maybe that instead of, if we follow that parcel line, then the one parcel preserves that meets all requirements of fencing, and we're considering that second parcel the side yard. If that helps in the way we word it.
Don't understand. So the front yard would be the R3s. The side
on
yard
page-
would be the R8.
Are you on page 8? The
I'm on
final
page 8.
The R8, and I guess,
The R8 would be a side yard, and the
correct, or
R3.
it could be a special use of a sport court, which would be a separate process, I
But
guess.
the two R3 lots would be, that fronting 11th would be the front yard.
I think you can meet the R3 lots' current setbacks with the way we described changes. So if you separated those parcels and that one met all requirements, wouldn't actually need us to approve a variance. And then if the R8 was was a special use permit for a sport court, then I think they just might be separate requests.
But for clarity, we're not talking about special use permit here. We're talking
No,
about a
we're not.
variance, so we've got to
But I
go,
think it
we
might-
have to go with what we have, a variance. We can perhaps, depending on the motion, change some where the fencing starts or where it ends or something like that, but we can't address, all right, this is a special use permit, it's got to be done
So,
some other way.
Mr. Randy said that he would be volunteering to help us, to guide us to a satisfactory conclusion addressing this. And as I see it, the question is all the property along 11th, R8 and R3, and the two R3s, is that the front yard or is that someplace a side yard? That's the issue. Randy, can you help us in some fashion, determining where a line should be between the
Hillary.
two? To help us structure this, where we can say, all right, the front yard goes up to this point, and then from there on, it's a side yard.
I probably can't help you on that one.
Well, I mean, that's the guts of the issue.
There are two parcels, and as I understand it, there's discussion about calling the R8 parcel a side yard, which would make that parcel a parcel without a front lot line.
Right.
And I don't know how you do that.
You don't know how to
Okay.
do that.
Because we can't condition it, right?
We have to make a motion, and whatever that motion might be, saying, and I'm hypothetically here, if a motion was granted saying a 6-foot fence along the R3 property is part of the motion as an approval, but on the R8 parcel, they're not a 6-foot fence, or no fence, or depending on what that motion is, and whether it gets approval or not approval, is that a legal way we can do it?
When I indicated I would help, I would tell you what findings are necessary.
But
Okay.
can we have two
I don't
sets
know
of
what the
findings?
motion is, so there needs to be a motion,
First.
and then we might be able to work our way through that.
Okay, so, given that conversation we're having here, let's see who's going to make a motion, first of all. And then we'll go from there.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I should have read more of this before I got into this.
it's okay.
Okay.
Take your time, take your time.
Introduction. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on September 13th, 2022, and there being present a person requesting approval of item V-1-22, a request for a variance in fence height to allow a 6-foot fence in the front yard setback area rather than the maximum of 4 foot as allowed. Applicant is Jack Riggs. Location is 801 South 11th Street. The findings, we have the justification B1 through B7, notification of neighborhood, et cetera. B8, pursuant to section 17.09.620 variance criteria, variance may be granted only when the applicant has demonstrated that all the variance criteria conditions are present in the affirmative. B8A, that there is an undue hardship because the physical characteristics of the site, and this is based on the actual orientation of the house at an acute angle that forces the north parcel, the R8, to become a side yard to their side of their home. And that in and of itself, to me, says that that is a reality of this house and how it's designed and how it's been sited. We also have a steep elevation on the south side, but that doesn't seem to be an issue in most of the area because they are all considered side yards or rear yards. And that the current, let me see, I should go back. That's okay. That, undue hardship. And that the steep site, this is the one flat area that's a usable area, and it would be advisable to secure it as a sport court. B8B, that the variance is not in conflict with the public interest as expressed by multiple supporting neighbors. There is no real public safety issue with 2 more feet when we have Arbor Vitae just north of it, over that 6-foot line, and that this is not an exceptional occurrence in this neighborhood as brought forth by the client, by the applicant. And if we could separate the R8 site from the R3 site, it would be advisable to follow the ordinances on the R3 site because that is the front of the house as it's oriented, and that the side of the house is facing the R8 section of the unusual lot. B8C, that the granting of said variance will be in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and this is based on the unified adjacencies of the neighborhood that also have exceptional fencing. We also are talking about an inclusive involvement for the public use of this sport court, obviously under supervision with a fence around it now, and that it maintains the community's friendly, welcoming atmosphere and a small-town feel. And that we do have a mix of land uses, and this is a perfect example of a mix of land uses. It is a very aesthetically pleasing house, and I don't think that an open metal fence is going to harm or do any harm to, there's no one turning in that area, there's no profound blocking of sight lines. So, in conclusion, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Jack Riggs for the variance as described in the application should be approved.
I have a motion. I'll second the motion.
Question on the motion.
Go ahead, question on the motion.
So that would mean a 6-foot fence could be constructed from the masonry wall down to the driveway. And
That.
you mentioned something, though, south of the the steps that go up, some other fence.
No fence south of the steps. They can have their rear yard and their side yard, but that fence in front of the current steps needs to go back 20 feet because that is the front of the house. So it shouldn't have a 6-foot fence in front of it. It can have a 4-foot, but it's not going to do much good with deer.
But further discussion on that, Lenny, if you can, I'm looking at this. If on page 3,
And then this
it's
is
called
kosher,
applicant's site plan.
right? And then this is here, and then they have to pick up their 20-foot fence up here. It's 20 foot back.
If we can all look on page B3, it's the applicant's site plan. I'll have that.
I even like this one.
No, page,
Oh, here we go, yeah.
no, I'm on page, this page.
Well, this
Here, you
one
can
works
use
for
mine
me
then.
too, because I can see it
Which
better.
page are you on?
I'm on page 3 with the
Yeah,
I like
applicant's site
17.
plan.
And she's,
And 17
The
works
motion
for
makes
Let's
me.
all get on
page
one
17.
page. Let's get on one page for a second.
17's really good.
Okay, so
'Cause
there's
it's- see the
that's
house?
up there on the screen is page 3, which is the applicant's site plan. Which one would you like to use?
I love
since-
17, because
Page
that shows the
17.
house.
All right, you're making the motion, so we're gonna let you.
The side of the house facing northeast is where the driveway pulls in, and the sport court, the 6-foot fence at the top is at the B8 site, or the R8 site, and then the sideline that they currently have shown, and then it returns into the actual garage. All, that 6-foot, this is all 6-foot side yard.
What's this here?
That's what I don't want. That's where they want the 6-foot. And this is all 6-foot, this is 6-foot, but then this drops back to a 20-foot setback. Has to stay off this, because that's the front of the house. I mean, I think we have to orient these fences in relationship to the house.
Okay.
So,
Because of
so,
the site.
so to, so to simplify the motion, I guess with the question.
Yeah.
Is that you're describing, I just watched you, so
Yep.
that north 6-foot line, that west 6-foot line, the further west 6-foot rear yard line, and that south 6-foot line, and
Right.
yeah,
But then-
and then stay 20 foot back from the street and tie it back that way.
Right.
So really, your motion really only allows a variance of the fence height from the masonry fence to the driveway,
Correct,
back to the garage.
correct,
Is that correct?
correct.
That's how I understand it, which is
Correct.
why on the findings, it said, on B3, it says zoning is R3. Do we need to clarify that it's R3 and R8? Because that's, you see
That's under
findings, the adopt B1 to 7.
page 1 of the findings.
Yes, that's a good catch.
Yeah.
I appreciate, like, we're all, I think we all want to see it a certain way, but I also appreciate the staff in that we might get 1,000 requests of approving people's fence lines, and where they should go. So I do feel like the description of when you're looking at the house to the left, and that can all be met within current variances and on that parcel. And it does sound like, I know it would be a separate process, but the sport court could also be met within current rules, although not today. I'm hesitant a little bit as we struggle to talk through it, that we might have more of these, especially if some owners have been approached by complaint about fences. And I don't know if that's our position to go through what type of material, on a lot of these particular things, when I think it can still be met within current setbacks and rules, just maybe a different avenue. So that might be my feedback on that. So,
Okay, so.
and it would support the staff, I guess, in their questions as they get them.
Okay, more discussion, Peter?
May I ask the maker of the motion, so the hardship is the orientation of the house.
Very much so. Yeah, it's not a cut and dried frontage on the front street, on 11th Street. It doesn't say, hey, this is the front of this house.
That's what the house doesn't say.
It doesn't say that.
But the legal description does, as directed to us by the city attorney. The front yard is the line up the street. So the legal description says one, but the aesthetics or the orientation of the house says something else, and that's the hardship. Thank you
Correct.
very much.
Correct.
So we do have a motion. We have a first, and I made a motion for the second. Further discussion?
Well, I can't support this motion.
Okay, well, we're going to get to Shannon doing a roll call on this
Well,
particular
let me
motion.
tell you the reason why.
Okay,
Maybe it's shared, maybe it isn't. That the hardship is not the orientation of the house. The house cannot be a hardship, I don't believe. Believe it's a legal thing. And the other is, I do not believe it's in the public interest, because we have these fence requirements throughout the city. And to do something different here is not appropriate. So I can't support the motion.
okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion before I ask for roll call from Shannon?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just to belabor this hardship deal, I go back to the 10-inch deal where it was so cut and dried, and the applicant just, they admitted, right, at that podium, they said, well, there's really no hardship. We're just looking for a little leeway. And we wanted to provide some leeway. Sometimes, some of these rules are pretty cookie cutter. And I look at this little sketch, and it's pretty, basic. It fits, most of the lots in town. Are we going to open the floodgates? I don't believe so with an approval here, because if somebody with a real atypical property comes in here tomorrow, that we said, well, yeah, that's an awkward site. Someone said an awkward site. Someone used that term. I said it's kind of a grand site. It's part of it's the scale of the size of this thing is just different than what this is trying to recognize, I think. So the uniqueness, the atypical, the configuration, the size, the awkwardness, the slopage, it is a one-of-a-kind deal. And there's 3 others in town. And if they have a case for a request for a fence I think we should listen. And I think what we would be approving here in this motion by Commissioner Fleming's motion, it affects really of that entire circumference there, a very small portion of it, really. So I don't think it's going to open the floodgates. I don't think we have done something out of the public interest. I think it would be a quality project to protect the interest in there. So, yeah.
Okay. Roll call, Shannon.
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Mandel,
Yes.
McCracken,
No.
Lutrip,
No.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, the variance does pass. Call for, go,
You need to call Messina's name as well.
Messina,
oh, I thought you did, yes.
yeah.
Okay, motion passes. Call for adjournment.
Move adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank
Motion
you.
to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.